Okay, I think we're good. What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Mikey Digital. I have a very special guest with me today. It's a close friend, also a long time friend, software dev, also a father. My guy, Lois. Welcome.
What's going on?
What's going on, brother?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, how's it going, buddy? Thank you for having me on the show. I was just thinking about that this morning. How long have we known each other? Because
Uh,
to me, it just feels like time is flat.
yeah,
I've always just known you, right?
yeah.
Like I don't really have a concept of before knowing you.
I feel like concept of time is really fucking weird the older you get. But I think the best benchmark is when I started DJing, and I think I started DJing like mid 20s, so that's like about more than 10 years ago, you know what I'm saying? Um, yeah, I
Because
mean,
I've been with my wife for 10 years.
yeah.
That's the longest relationship
And then what? We known
I've
each
ever been
other,
in.
right? So we known each other
And
like a
I met you a year or two before that, right?
exactly. So it's about around that time, I would say. Um, but yeah, man, I'm really happy that I got you on this show. I know I've been wanting to do this for the longest time. Of course, we're gonna do like a little bit of introduction, just explain who you are and where you came from. I personally think it's important to explain who you are and how you got brought up, because I feel like you're one of the, perfect examples of like, a guy who made it from the bottom up. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about, we have we live in a country where everything's like, there are people that have certain privileges and stuff like that, whereas I don't see you have any of that. In fact, there's a couple of stories I really want to get into just from the outside perspective. I seen things you did and I was just like, holy shit, like nobody would think of doing some shit like that. But I digress a little bit. Let me know, like, where you was born, and like where you from the time that you was born, and like your childhood, what that was like. And then we'll go into like, further into your teenagers and then to your adult life, if you want to go ahead and take that away.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And anything that stands out, feel free to just jump in. And I'm very transparent. You know that about me. I have no problem expressing myself.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone gives me a platform or a bench, I'll go on top and just start talking nonsense. So,
You're all good,
yeah,
brother.
just ask me. As we're talking, feel free to ask me, and we can go into anything. To answer your question, I was born in Boston. Uh, first generation American, first person in my family to be born in the United States. I have a lot of family now
Yeah.
here in the United States, but at that time, I was the only one that was ever born here. Of my mom, single mom raised. My father lived in Washington Heights, New York City, so I was always commuting back and forth between Boston and New York City. Somewhere around sixth grade or so, my mom met my previous stepfather and moved us to Florida, which is how I ended up in Florida.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
then same exact cycle there, where I would go
From Florida
from
to New York
Florida
City
to New York
to see
City.
your pops or whatever.
Right. So yes, I was very much used to. For me, it feels normal, but now that I'm older and I have a family, I can see how not normal it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very used to like feeling comfortable in a lack of stability, which I'm bringing up because I think later in life those experiences helped me navigate the challenges of life, or challenges of like breaking into tech, or the challenges of
Right.
just like uncertainty is a part of life, right? Like what we know is that we're going to be uncomfortable, right, at different moments. So
Sure.
how we manage that, how we deal with that, how we shift our perception of that, like all these things play into that. And I think my childhood actually gave me some of that foundation. I was talking with my wife, and again, like I don't know, these things are weird because I live them. But I was talking to my wife, and she said, that's really crazy. When I was living in Boston up until fifth grade, it's a 4-hour drive from Boston to New York City. My mom used to put me on the bus, like those like China buses, or there
Chinatown
used to be
buses. Yeah.
yeah, if you remember those. And there were also a Dominican version of that. So I'm from the Dominican Republic. There was
I
a
didn't even know.
specific Dominican bus that would take you from like the Dominican neighborhood in Boston
Oh,
to
that
the
was a
Dominican neighborhoods of
that,
New
that
York.
was a competition,
Yeah,
man.
it was it was absolutely nuts. But they used to put me on that bus
By yourself.
first, second, third, fourth by myself, and then it'll take me to the door in the Heights. And listen, as an adult talking to my mom, she's like, "We knew, you know, your father had friends at the company. We knew the driver,
Ah, okay.
etc." But as a kid, it doesn't change the fact that I was like 6, 7, or 8 on a bus with strangers by myself with like $100 in my pocket, you know. And these buses, halfway through, they always stop somewhere for gas and food. So like I had a real sense of responsibility. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get off this bus.
How
I
old
gotta
were you?
get food and run back.
And how
This
old
is
was you at
first.
first?
It was between first and fifth grade.
Yeah, so
So
you were
this
like
is
you were like a little freaking kid.
yeah, and like I used to remember, like I'd get off the bus and be like, I gotta run to the McDonald's. I gotta order my food, and I gotta run back, or the bus will leave without me.
Right, because you're a
Like,
kid, you'd be freaking out. That's so scary to be left alone, right? Like it's different when as you're adult.
right, and listen, it's still not something I would recommend people do with their children, and it's not like the bus driver or the people on the bus would be like, let's leave without the 6-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, people were gonna make sure that I made it on, but in my mind,
That's how you felt,
I
yeah.
have to be on top, right? I used to do that all the time, man, and I don't know how, in what ways that influenced like how my personality developed or how like, you know, my unconscious psyche developed.
Right.
But I do think something I attribute to those experiences is
Definitely independence.
my ability to independence and like the skill sets needed to lean into uncertainty.
Right.
Because
not work. Yeah.
I was faced with my perceived obstacle, right? And uncertainty, like, am I going to make it there?
Right.
What if they don't take me there, right? And I also think another interesting one that when I was talking to my wife, I realized is that I think it also helped me develop mindfulness. I think that was my first real experience with meditation and mindfulness, because I did not know what these things were, right? As a kid, like I had no concept of meditation, but this is early, like late 90s, mid 90s. There was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
There was no game. This is like pre-Game Boy.
Right.
Later on, Game Boys were a thing, but it was like really early. Yeah, actually, I remember when I was older, I used to have a Game Boy on these trips at one point, but there was no backlight on the Game Boy,
so you can't see it at night time.
The car, you can't see anything.
And also, if the light is too strong too, it's like, and if your battery wasn't strong enough, it starts fading away a little bit. So yeah, it was very.
The LEDs are fading. Yeah,
the environment had to be ideal for the Game Boy. The original Game Boys, yeah, the environment had to be ideal.
Yeah,
otherwise, you just don't touch that shit.
And the thing is, like that means for 4 or 5 hours as a kid, I had to sit down in silence in an environment where I didn't know anyone. So I wasn't talking. I wasn't like partying. I was just sitting down by myself as a kid for long stretches of time, thinking in my thought, using my imagination, thinking about how much fun I was gonna have in New York City, thinking about like, all right, we're an hour away from the McDonald's. I have to make sure I have enough money. Like just and again, there was nothing specific, but I think years of doing that trip, like you said, helped build some independence.
Yep.
Helped me learn how to lean into like uncertainty, but also just built me in a way that made me okay being in my thoughts.
Right. I think that's interesting you bring that up, because the other day, you know, of course, you know, I live in Japan now, so there's a ramen shop, local shop that's close by me. You know, sometimes I just leave my phone because I'm just like, why do I need my phone with me when I eat? But it was weird because when I wait for my order, I'm just sitting there, and like, yeah, sure, I could read the menu, but I'm so used to like being on my phone or just, you know what I mean? Mostly my phone. I'm just so used to looking at stuff that it felt so weird. And I was just like, yeah, going back to what you were just saying, being mindful, you know, the mindfulness of just being by yourself with your thoughts, you should be okay with that, you know, especially because like, you know, that's what humans were doing, right? Like what are we doing before always being preoccupied with information all the time? And I just think that, you know, talking about this now makes me feel like, yeah, I should practice that a little bit more, not just always trying to feed my brain information all the time. I just feel like, it's exhausting, right? Like I can't imagine how much less stress I would have without these things. But
No, 110%. And
yeah,
I ran those experiments where like I'm a high performer in everything
yeah,
that I do, and we'll talk more about that later. But I've ran those experiments where like I'm going to be plugged in and execute, and I'm going to be disconnected and execute. The results, anecdotally, were always the same. So all I was doing by being extra plugged in was inducing stress to my system. It wasn't actually like making me make
more
more
effective,
money or
right?
deliver faster. Because ultimately, what's important always rises to the top of your urgency,
Right.
right? So if there was a real emergency and you didn't have your phone, people will find a way to reach you.
Yeah.
So really, by having your phone all the time, you're just letting all the bullshit sort of simmer to the top, and that just induces stress. One thing that I do, and I would recommend anyone that listens to this, just try. Drop simple. Every day, I do a 30-minute clarity walk. No phone, just go outside, just walk for 30 minutes. Don't worry about what to think about or not think about. Don't focus on that. Your brain will figure that out for you. Just go outside and walk. And that was something that I never realized. I've been doing that for years.
Okay.
Now I do it intentionally because I'm based out of Austin right now. So there's like, it's more suburban. So like I have to make sure I do that walk. I didn't realize that I was getting the benefits of that every single day in New York City. Because as you know, when we were living in Brooklyn, when I was living in the Heights,
You always
you just
walking
end up walking for 30 an hour.
to get to where you need to get to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's especially back in our day when there wasn't easy Wi-Fi. Now there's like Wi-Fi on like the.
I mean, we didn't even have cell phones. Like cell phones weren't a thing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so we just. I was doing these practices that are like, to your point, are how humans lived forever,
Right.
and we're giving me a lot of benefits. And I think you're right. We have lost a lot of that because of how interconnected we are,
Right.
and we don't realize how many side effects of health benefits we get from just like, I'm going to just walk for a while, or I'm just going to like turn off for a bit.
Real quick, I wanted to talk a little bit about, your life in contrast with New York City growing up versus Florida, because I know you were born in Boston, but I feel like your main influences came from these two states. If you could elaborate a little bit on that, because then I want to segue a little bit into how you got into tech. So just a little bit about anything that you could remember, what kind of influences you had from these two places and what it gave you, and then also we'll like I said, we'll segue a little bit into how you got into tech. That would be the next thing. So if you want to take it from there.
For sure. So in Florida, I lived with my mother, my stepfather. He has a son. He was my stepbrother, and I was there for a few years. And then in New York City, I lived with my father for a while. That's around the time that we met.
Yeah.
I used to always visit, but then I moved there and lived there my senior year of high school. That's where we met.
Right.
In New York City, I have 3 cousins. I love them. They're like my brothers. Every summer when I would visit my father would leave me with them. And I think a lot of my work ethic, my ability to like view the world, forming my mental model of how to move and operate came from them. And what Florida gave me was the realization that the world is bigger than what I thought it was, right? Because you have to imagine, at this point, the internet wasn't really a thing. It was just starting off, right? Growing up, even when I was older and there was internet, it wasn't the internet we see today, right? So interconnectedness online just wasn't a thing yet. So I grew up predominantly in Boston and New York. Yes, those are different cities, but culturally they're very similar, right?
Okay.
So I developed a worldview or a culture that was very close to like a kid in New York growing up in the 90s, right? Which I think you could relate to.
Yep.
A lot of our viewers could relate to like what that kid might look like. And then when I go to Florida, there's big houses, there's pools, there's people doing mixed martial arts and wrestling,
Right.
like all these things that just didn't exist in New York culture. And that was the first time, like what it gave me was the contrast of like, this is the world and then the actual world is significantly bigger.
Right.
There's more out there. There's more types of content. There's more types of music. There's more types of personalities. Things that you believe fundamentally were cool or truths in the culture of New York are not a thing in the culture of Florida.
Right.
And vice versa. So I think for me, that was my first realization of like what I would call now like where the leverage is or arbitrage. It was me being like, there's things I can do in Florida that I can't do in New York. What would it do for me if I brought that to my circle in New York City? Right. Like at a young age, it's like, how can this help me get more girls or be cool in front of my friends?
Right.
As I got older, it became the opposite, right? Because me and you had a small project where we knew living in New York, we could get access to exclusive clothing, sneakers, etc. And then people in Florida, or really anywhere out of New York, they can't access this. There's arbitrage there, right? So it's like we have something we take for granted in New York is exclusive everywhere else in the world. Like there's leverage there, right? And how can we do that to like build value, build some wealth, build some opportunities for ourselves? So really that's what that juxtaposition did for me. It just showed me how different the world is from what I thought I knew. And I think the other big thing that Florida gave me was a community that wasn't the community that I was used to. One of my good friends that I think you've had him on the podcast before, is Victor from Liberation Coaching. It's a phenomenal coach.
Shout out to Vic.
And shout out, go check out his stuff, Zen Stoicism. It's phenomenal. It's his life work. And I met him in Florida, early high school. And, he is a kid, or he's an adult now, but at the time he was a kid who was just doing mixed martial arts, and just being a regular kid. Just, like, play video games, play cartoons. And for me, when I would go over his house as we were like growing up, like that was crazy to me. Like I didn't even understand like what it meant to really be a kid, because growing up in New York, even when you're a kid, it's a completely different childhood upbringing, right? Definitely. You got the boys on the block. You got to like learn how to do the MTA, which is like these are not things like, I have a son right now, he's 3. He is not thinking about any of that shit. He's going to the park and playing with trucks, right? So, meeting friends in Florida showed me people that had a different upbringing. And that, again, it just expanded my mind. It challenged me, right? It's like, you have to be hard. You have to be ready to throw it out. But in Florida, that's not really a thing. It's like, you could trust people. You could be friendly. You could be more open. So just my mental model of the world was like just being challenged all the time, because then I'll be in Florida and I'll be super nice and friendly and trusting, which is a great thing. But then I go to New York and then reality will hit me and be like, you're being naive. Someone's going to take advantage of you. You're going to get scammed. And it's like, you don't want to be too much of either or. You want to find a healthy middle. And that's what those two environments gave me. It gave me perspective, right? Like there is go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's interesting that you point that out, because like, at least from the New York City perspective, certain things that we valued, it was like the world to us, right? Like we felt like you had to be real, you had to be, ears to the street, stuff like that. But if you don't traverse from outside of that, when you do traverse out of that, you realize there's no power in these things, right? Like some of the things that I grew up in, then I felt like were the rules of life, it don't apply to that. Like I'm in Japan now, you know what I'm saying? All that gangster stuff that I learned, growing up and stuff like that, it doesn't even fucking, it doesn't even freaking matter now. You know what I mean? And I think the one thing that we relate, because I also moved around a lot too, because my parents split up as well. So, I've been in different like parts of United States as well. But, I think I do agree with you to the fullest extent. You really have to become adaptable and understand that, what I used to do over here doesn't apply over here. And I have to open myself to that. Otherwise, I'm just kind of constraining myself. But
what we would call that today, like having developed better language, what we call that today is limiting beliefs, right? Like it was a belief system that helped us navigate, Brooklyn, Washington Heights, and it served us, right? Like it kept us safe. It gave us a sense of perspective. But the moment you step out of that environment, those beliefs become limiting, because now, and we have spent years talking about this, and like, as friends, those same beliefs become the reason why we can't move forward in other areas.
Right. But now just a little bit, I guess from there, I kind of want to get into the turning point of like in your, going into adulthood. How did you get into tech? So, I would like to start
You
off.
were there.
Yeah, I know, but I need. But you know,
I know.
but you know,
I know.
the thing was, I don't even know what made you decide that. Like, I want to know from the very beginning, like, why tech, why software engineer, like, what kind of like brought you to that decision?
Hold up.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, Rex. It's like, where do ideas first get planted? I can, in hindsight, look back at multiple small moments and be like, maybe that was it. So it's hard to say. Like, I have my cousin who's like an older brother. Shout out to him. When we were growing up, he would like take apart the PS2
Right.
and like rebuild it from scratch, right? Like savant shit. I never had too much interest other than just watching him do it. It's not like I was like eager to do it too. But maybe that planted the seed. I don't know. You know, a mentor of mine who passed away, Michael, I met him when he dated my mom. He was like a father figure to me. And when I would, sometime in like middle school, I went to visit him after they had already broken up. And we were just watching movies and he was like, hey, Lou, here's some text. Just copy this text and I'll give you $20. And then he was like, hey, Lou, I have a question. Use the computer to find the answer for me. That sounds super simple today, but when I was like 12, he was teaching me how to do Google search. He was teaching me how to break down a question. Hey, what's Keanu Reeves' middle name, right? Like, it was some shit like that. I had to actually like learn how to construct that in the form of a question for Google. Everyone knows how to do this today.
Yeah.
When Google first came out, you know, in those early years, people didn't know how to Google stuff, right? Like, so, you know, I don't know if looking back, if that was him planting seeds, because that text he was having me copy was code. Right. I didn't know it was code. He didn't tell me it was code. He was just having me look at code. So like my brain cannot be like intimidated by it at some later date. I really don't know what he was trying to do or not do in that moment. I was so young, and, you know, unfortunately passed away, but like that may have been the point. I don't know at what point like building stuff as an engineer started being planted, but I do know when I decided to take ownership of my life and lean into something that I was excited and passionate about. And that was, you know, living with you in Brooklyn.
Yeah, we were roommates.
Yeah, we were roommates
Sunset
for a
Brooklyn.
while. Yeah, and we were both working at T-Mobile doing sales at the time.
Right.
We were very successful at sales. I think I had a pretty solid career.
And you were the best, bro.
Yeah, I was definitely breaking a couple records there, but you know, which is great. I love connecting with people.
Yeah.
It always made sense to me. You know, I definitely had a talent for it, but I guess at some point in that journey, a couple things started happening. You know, the first one was I realized that there were limits to my income potential at T-Mobile.
Yeah.
In sales, there's ways of making money in sales that are infinite. Right. So I mean, it's not necessarily a criticism of sales itself. It was just in that position, I know that there was only so far that I can go. Let's say like, I think it was like 45, 50K a year at that time. Right. And we knew that they were actively working against us. They were always changing policy. So like salespeople couldn't make as much off of their sales. I was trying to move up into a leadership role because I had all the qualities of a leader. And the feedback I was getting was, you're too valuable as a salesperson. If we put you in a leadership track,
they would lose money.
Selling, and they would lose money. So like, again, I felt like, okay, this is not really working for me. And that just like opened up my receptors to like what's possible out there, like what else is out there.
What's the next step, right?
It may or may not end up being code at that time, right? It's just like I was just kind of like my feelers were out there, but again, very casual. And then there were a few other small moments. I forgot his name, but you had a friend who was an engineer who would always come around and like go to parties with us.
Oh, okay. Like I think you're talking about Grant.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think definitely was. But and there were just a few moments where you were just like, hey, Grant does coding. He builds stuff. And this may seem little, but this may seem little. He didn't help me. He didn't teach me anything.
Yeah.
But just use those sentences. Believe it or not, up until like those months, no one ever told me that like, this sounds so ridiculous to say out loud, but it's like, no one ever told me that like you code and then something gets built.
Right.
Like Facebook is an app that you could like. I just thought like there are apps. Like I never thought deeper than like that. Actually, someone's coding this.
You never, right. You never thought, right. You never thought to like think about how it was done. You just like, oh, that's just it was just that, right?
Yeah. No one ever even said the word coding to me.
Right.
Like, it just these things just didn't exist. So just like the concept of an engineer was planted, and then on the personal side, I would always go. At that time, we were raving a lot, partying a lot, and I don't want to put anyone else's business out there, so I'll just speak to myself. I did a good amount of acid or Molly or whatever, and that was just that lifestyle at that time. And
shout out to psychedelics.
I was a wild boy because my cousins, or like my brothers, they're on point. Like they're about their business. One's a detective, one's working for the DEA. Like they're about the business. I'd just show up to their spot in the Heights at like 6 a.m. Come down, fucking sweaty and dirty from raving or whatever.
Your eyes all fucking tweaked out and shit.
So even though I was making good money, I was paying my bills, I was thinking about my future, like this to just a position. That was a weekend. Let my hair down and relax with the homies type of activity.
Right.
I was still on the grind, right? Still had still
doing your thing, right?
Personality. Yeah, but from their perspective, I just show up every couple weeks, like fucking high on acid.
Right.
7 a.m. And I don't know why this cut deep, but the oldest one, he spent some time telling me, hey man, here's some salaries. Cybersecurity person can make $60K a year. An engineer can make like he was like throwing numbers at me. And
he's being big brother.
At the time he was He was at the time. He's like, if you go to college, you can get a degree, you can make this much money. Just do the math, see what's working for you. Yada yada yada. And again, I was like, okay, my mind is being opened up, right? Like I still didn't see a path for myself.
Right.
And then my other cousin, who's also like a brother, he just pulled me aside one day. At this point he's graduating, John Jay, he has a job lined up with the DEA or whatever. He just pulled me aside and he was just like, dude, what are you doing with your life? Like, is this it? Like, his perspective was, you're the youngest of us three, so you're the best of us three, because you have the cumulative experience of all of us within you, right? Like the oldest was 7 years older.
Had it figured out.
Wisdom to give. He had 7 years of wisdom that he gave you. I'm 5 years older. I have 5 years of wisdom I gave you, right? I don't know what about that moment, but just like I just broke down crying. I don't know where that came from, but I think to me in hindsight, it was the emotional realization. Conscious didn't realize it, but emotionally, I realized that I was not living congruent, right? Like I had a good life, I was making money, but it was very transactional and I didn't feel like I was doing something that was worth doing for myself.
It's a cogwheel in the system.
Yeah, I was just like, I wasn't even on a journey for the thing that I wanted to do, right? So totally out of alignment in at that time of my life. And that really pushed me hard to be like, okay, well, what do I actually want to do? Right. And just like start doing that like internal work. And there was a moment at T-Mobile where I had closed a couple big sales and I want to know how much I got paid. And I had to do a whole bunch of math and it fucking sucked. And everyone around me wanted to do how much they were going to get paid. They had to do math, so it fucking sucked. So I was like, okay, how can I build a thing that just tells me my commission? So I went on my laptop, found a programming language called Ruby, found something called Ruby the hard way, where you just copy the code and it just like you slowly get introduced to it.
Right. Started
like I went on Reddit and just DM'd random people like, yo, teach me how to code, and like no one really helped me, but everyone gave me a couple sentences, and I just started piecing.
Okay.
Started piecing the world. I eventually built that thing, and super simplistic, nothing impressive. But what it did do was give me a paradigm shift. I went from selling value to creating value. I built something through my own thinking that helped myself and the people around me become better salespeople, because now they can know how much money they're making if they do a sale. They know what sales are worth it or not worth it in real time with this like calculator, right? And that paradigm shift, that's when I started leaning in. And I know I'd ask you like, hey, can I talk to Grant? Do I actually need a 4-year degree? You're like, Grant didn't do it. Again, Grant was not very helpful. He wasn't interested in like helping me out, but he gave me pieces, right? He said, I taught myself. I didn't go to a 4-year school and I'm an engineer. And I was like, if this motherfucking goofball can do it, then maybe I can do it, right? And it's just like pieces. And again, I would trick myself, right? Like, obviously know your worth, know what's possible, but what helped me was almost tricking my psychology to an extent. And one way that I did that was saying, at T-Mobile, I'm making max as a killer at T-Mobile, max, I'm making $50K a year. Okay. The worst engineer at that time is making at least 60, 65K a year. So I was like, even if I'm the worst engineer and they're just taking advantage of me, I'm still making 20K more than I am now. And I'm probably living a more comfortable life. I got benefits. I don't got to stress as much. You know, I can build from that.
Also, just being tired of the political bullshit that you were dealing with T-Mobile and the management.
And and obviously I'm not the worst engineer. So I made way more than that. But like, I had to tell myself these stories. And this is where, like, you know, I do have a story where I took myself from where I was and I worked my way into where I am. But I think it's not fair. And it's not fair to say that like community wasn't an aspect, like that, those moments with Grant, these moments with my brother, like these little pieces, I was able to use them. But also, you know, I think it's fair to be like, the government, for better or for worse, wherever your stance are, also created an opportunity for me to succeed. Because around that time, New York City just launched the Tech Talent Pipeline. This is before boot camps, right? This is like before boot camps were even proven out. Everyone still thought you needed a 4-year degree to be an engineer. It's like that circle. So it's a very different world than today. So like put that in perspective. And the New York City just launched Tech Talent Pipeline. They were going to do their very first program. And they were like, if you don't have a college degree and you make less than a certain amount of money, apply and we'll put you through a boot camp that will take you from not knowing how to code to at least being employable.
This was Flatiron, right?
Flatiron School. Shout out to Flatiron. They got acquired by WeWork, which is kind of funny.
Really?
But yeah. Shout out to them.
Well, WeWork ain't doing too good right now, though, right?
No.
But, unfortunately.
But Flatiron School was a gem at that time. You know, just great team of people who. There's a difference between like anyone who becomes an educator. I think is like worthy of some recognition. But there is a difference between like boot camps are proven. So I'm going to go work at a boot camp as a career option, and like no one knew if this would work. And those early engineers stopped taking 6-7 figure job offers to go try and prove that boot camps work and that they could help people from underprivileged backgrounds learn enough coding to get a job. That was not proven yet. Flatiron was, to me, like in my experience, they were one of the first to try to really prove that out and try to scale that up.
Which now that's like the standard for like all these people that are getting into tech. Nobody goes to college for tech. I mean, you can, and I'm sure it's very helpful. I'm sure they have programs, but I'm sure I don't know the statistic, but I know there's a good amount of people. There's a good amount of people that are not going through college programs to get into tech.
If you're doing some sort of specialized work, it could be very useful, and you may even have to do it. But tech itself is such a big umbrella that there are pockets where you just don't need it. And there are paths to learn these things without it. Even the concept of like, well, you should go to college because you're going to get a more traditional CS. A lot of the best courses in CS are available for free online. And like people go through that education without actually like going through the tuition or like the rigmarole of like going through traditional college, right? But at that point, these things just didn't exist, right? And they were like, we have like a 1%, 2% acceptance rate. We're only letting all of New York City, we're only letting 30 people in.
So I'm sure you have this back in your mind, but I want you to tell everybody how you got in. I don't know if that was
Yeah,
something that was
so
coming up, but yeah, please, because this is
yeah. I'll definitely mention it. The reality
so
was
30 people would at this program that was starting out, only 30 people could get in, right?
only 30 people can get in. It was like a 1%, if not less than 1% acceptance rate. New York City, there are millions and millions and millions of residents.
Yeah.
I understood very clearly that statistically, I was not going to be let into this program. I also understood that this program gave me an opportunity to break through into an industry that I wanted to break through. So for me, whether if I got in or not wouldn't deter me from pursuing this as like what I wanted to do, because I did feel like I was in alignment. But I'm a strong believer that, like, there's I have it right here on my desk. It's this quote from Marcus Aurelius. It's called "The obstacle is the way, the impediment to action advances action." So I understood that, like, the path through Flatiron was going to be difficult to get in, even difficult to go through.
Yeah.
But I wanted to lean into that and just see how far that option can take me.
Head first.
So I was just right. So I thought to myself, like, how could I do that? And I just jumped on the Google. I found who the current CEO, the founder was of Flatiron School.
Okay.
I got their first and last name. And I thought to myself, okay, well, let's try some things. I tried every combination: first letter, last name, first name, last letter, first and last name at Flatiron School. And I just sent an email. And in that email, I was saying, listen, I'm not asking for you to let me into the program. What I'm asking is for you to give me an opportunity to demonstrate that I belong in this program. Whatever you think that may be, please, this is important to me.
Wow.
And I didn't know this at the time, but what I was doing was I wasn't asking for them. I was asking for a favor, right? Because, like, ultimately, like, let me show you that I'm
right. Yeah, you're worthy, right?
But I think the distinction I want to make is I didn't say, hey, let me into this program. I said, just let me show you that I belong in this program, however you think that would be. Like, I was asking for the test. I was asking for the interview. I wasn't asking for the job. I was like, just give me a shot at the plate. And right now there's a big conversation around, like, equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. I lean towards equality of opportunity, which is essentially, for those that don't know, is I believe everyone should be given a shot to take a swing.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. Like, and that's what I was asking for. I was asking for, like, hey, let me just take a swing in a creative way, because I knew the pipeline is gonna get thousands of people coming in. It might be very hard to stand out. So I was just trying to find a creative way to stand out and for a shot to hit or miss. And he responded to me, and he said, listen, we have a beta program of pre-work online. It takes 2 weeks to complete. Go through it and follow back up with me. Here's a link. And also he invited me to, like, their, like, Slack group or whatever.
Right.
So I can go through as a beta tester, as a student beta tester for their new program. I signed up for better or for worse, because I know this created a little bit of friction between me and you. I basically quit T-Mobile at that spot.
Right.
That was maybe not the most responsible way of handling that. But what I needed in that moment was to be able to dedicate time.
Well, you had to make a choice.
Proving to this person.
Right.
And I can work 40 hours and just bang away at this program slowly, or I can just, like, take a week or two and that's why leverage is important. I was working in T-Mobile, but I had a little bit of money stashed because I knew at some point I was going to want to make a move. I was like, this is the move. I took some time away from T-Mobile and I essentially just sat down every day and worked through this program. Every day I worked through this program. And I think in 1 week, I got through like 75 or 80% of it.
Right.
I learned a whole bunch. I put my ego aside. If I was blocked, I would email someone from Flatiron, be like, hey, I'm doing the beta program and I don't know how to, like, do this equation or this type of function. And I'll go on, like, a Google Meet and talk to you. Like, I just leaned in fully and just embraced the process and just try to do as much work as possible. And at the end of it, after all that effort, the founder got back to me and said, we'll put you in the first round of interviews.
Wow.
So that didn't get me into the program.
Right.
It got me past the shuffle of applications.
Of the thousands and thousands of applications that probably are never going to even get looked at.
It didn't guarantee anything else.
Right.
It just got me past the pre-screener, right? And then,
which was already freaking hard. It's just a lottery. Yeah.
I think for me, winning the lottery was, or getting past the lottery was the most important step, because for me, this is my own, a little bit of my own ego. I'm okay. So I believe that like failure isn't actually a problem. It's not when you fail, it's how you fail, right? So like when you fail, it's actually a beautiful thing. If you try your best and you put your best foot forward, when you fail is actually an opportunity of growth. And I think that's the right way to think about failure. It's part of the process. Now, if when you fail or how you fail is giving up or not trying, that's a problem.
Right.
And that's not acceptable. And you should really work on just like not pursuing failure or viewing failure in that way. So for me, not getting into the lottery would have been frustrating because I feel like you didn't even give me a chance to fail.
Right.
I didn't talk to no one. I didn't demonstrate. But getting into the first round, if I didn't pass that round, I would ask for feedback and I'd be like, perfect, I'll go work on that.
Right.
And then I'll come back again next time or whatever. Like I'll just keep improving, right? So I was just grateful because now I knew that if I got in or not, it'd be based off my own merit. And if I didn't get in, I put my best foot forward, and that gives me a chance to reflect and grow. So that was the mindset I had going in. Round one was just an interview about like my background, nothing crazy. I explained to them the entire process because it was somewhat of an exciting story. I got into round two. Round two was in the next like 3 days, build tic-tac-toe any way you want coding wise. And like, again, I'm not an engineer.
Right.
I've never built anything. I've only done this little calculator in Ruby. And it was overwhelming to try to like build tic-tac-toe.
Right.
So how I did that, again, it goes back to like, I worked hard to get to where I am, but I always want to acknowledge the community, the luck, and to some extent even the government for even just creating programs like this. But in the community side, basically my brother, I told him like, hey, I'm trying to get in, I got to build tic-tac-toe. And to his credit, he said, well, if you want to make this a career, you have to do it yourself. Like I can't help you do it because that's going to show when it matters, which is for a job for money, right? So he said, but what I will do is come over to my place and we'll figure it out. So I went to his place, and what he gave me, again, I didn't know this at the time, he had more experience with coding. He cleared his room, he cleared his office, he sat me down and he said, here's a big ass whiteboard, write down every step to tic-tac-toe on this whiteboard, and then take as much time as you need to translate that whiteboard into an actual like code. And then he left. And I never knew that, we grew up in an environment where education, I think, really failed us and didn't really serve us well. So I never even knew the idea of like breaking down a problem and like a whiteboard into steps, like as a way of taking something big and chunking it down. That was a foreign concept to me at that time. But the moment he said that, to me, it just kind of like, oh, duh, tic-tac-toe is a big problem, but it starts with 2 players. Yep. And then it goes to somebody can choose one thing. Then you can keep chunking it down until you get something so easy and obvious that you can just type it up, right? And then you build, and then you world build from there. You build the tic-tac-toe world, right? And him sitting me down and just showing me that strategy allowed me to actually build that tic-tac-toe game within like a couple of days.
Interesting. So basically what you're doing is you're creating an outline of whatever you're trying to build in actual words. But then those actual steps, you're translating that into code. Because
and we think about it like this.
Right.
If you want to do anything, you might do a checklist. Right.
That's interesting. So I don't know anything about code. I never really got into that. But that makes so much sense, because I understand that code is language. So in this aspect, I do get now, it makes all the sense how this works and why, people are able to build. Because in theory, you could build it so many different ways, tic-tac-toe, right? Like how let's say for example, like the steps of like who takes the turn, what the turn looks like, whatever it is, right? But it's just like, that's where code comes in, right? Like how do you translate that? You could translate it in so many different ways. But and then you get to the point where like, what's the most efficient way? Or are we trying to build something most efficient? Are we trying to build something pleasant? But yeah. So your brother showed you, hey, just make the steps, and then now from there you translated those steps into code essentially, right? That's what happened.
Yeah, and like and that's kind of funny looking back on it. I still have that code. That code is garbage. Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah.
Terrible code. But also it's not garbage, right? Because it's like you have to define what garbage means, right? Relative speaking, as an engineer with over a decade of experience, that's not my best work.
Yeah.
So I would say a word like garbage. Another way of looking at it though is that like it does play tic-tac-toe.
Right.
So is it garbage? Because it does the thing that it was built to do. It served its purpose.
Right.
It accomplished the game, and it got me into the last round, which was again just another culture fit round.
Right.
Which then got me into Flatiron School.
That's interesting. So they really treated like it's like a job almost, like it was a job interview round situation. Huh? Because and
I really don't know what their expectation was. Like I talked to some people in the program. Some were just like, oh, I wasn't able to build tic-tac-toe, but I showed them the whiteboard. Like I showed them my notes or whatever. Like I don't know if they were necessarily filtering for did you build tic-tac-toe or filtering for do you know how to break down problems and think through stuff? Because the whole point of the program is to teach you how to code anyway. So if you knew how to code, then why would you be in the program?
I think that's what I was thinking. I think it was not really like great. If you could build it, great, that's fine. But I think if they were more worried about how do you think and from point A to point Z, right? What did you do? Like, how did you approach this situation? Because again, going back to what I was saying, you could essentially do this so many different ways, right? But like, are you trying to do it the most efficient way? Are you trying to do it the most quickest way? Like they probably just wanted to see how you think at the end of the day. Because like you said, the other people didn't really build it out. They just showed the steps. I think that's at the end of the day, in essence, as an engineer, you're a problem solver, right? Like at the end of the day, you're basically building these things to solve problems, and that's what they're looking for, I definitely want to get into that a little bit more because there are people that I know that are getting into the software development world, and I would love to hear from somebody that's seasoned, what you should do from the beginning, what things that you wish that you had known now, the things that you know now, which you had wished that known starting your journey. I also want to get into like, this would be more after, but like what kind of tech that's out right now. What are like, cool things that are happening in the tech world. But I think in the beginning, we'll still go into, how you got into, explaining from Flatiron into you getting into actual work. But at some point, I definitely want to talk about anybody, like advice for like the younger generation or just people that are just getting into this space. But just go back into Flatirons and talk. You could talk about that experience a little bit if you want.
Yeah, that was an interesting time. I feel like I'm somewhat of a weird individual, so what made sense for me may not make sense for everyone. How I like create story for myself to make sure I'm engaged and motivated, I think is a superpower that I have that, if other people can benefit from it, I definitely recommend it. But, for Flatiron School, I told myself a couple stories, right? The first story was like, even if I'm the worst engineer, I'll be making more money than I'm making now at T-Mobile, and I'll be happier.
Right.
Holy shit, I get to actually be happy, with the stuff that I'm doing. So I told myself a story like that. Another story that helped me like overcome Flatiron School, which I communicated out. I was very transparent with like the leadership there. I was like, I come from an environment where I do not know any one person who's a software engineer. At that time, my brother was just graduating John Jay and working for the DEA, but I didn't even know if he was going to code or not. He was doing like forensics, so the actual concept, like I build a website, I build a mobile app or whatever, like it was very foreign to me. I didn't know anyone. All the messaging was around like a 4-year degree and computer science, and I had no real concept, right? So I used to just tell them like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to learn or pick this up or get a job, but I'm here. So I'm going to come every day and do everything you say. And I'm trusting that at the end of it, you'll hold up your end of that expectation and help me get a job. Right. And I made that, like, I was very honest and vulnerable with them about that. And their feedback was like, if you come in every day and you complete all of our work, you will be employable. We cannot guarantee you a job, but the reason you don't get a job won't be because you don't know how to do some code. And they also were very straightforward too. I'll never forget it. It's hard to show it in a podcast, but if you're listening or if you're watching, I'll try to like do it with my hands or whatever, explain it. He drew 2 circles, a big circle and a small circle. This is the founder of Flatiron School. And in the small circle, he wrote your comfort zone. And in the big circle on the edges of it, he wrote absolute panic, anxiety, mental breakdown. And then somewhere in the middle, outside of your comfort zone, but besides that panic, he made an X and he goes like hard work. And he was like, this is where you need to live every day. You need to live outside of your comfort zone, but you have to make sure you never reach a point where you're like breaking down and panicking. You want to be like, and he was like, the closer you can get to that breaking point, but not actually get there, is the harder the work will be, but the more rewarding and quicker you'll learn and grow. So it's like, you're just trying to essentially explain that, like, you know, hard things are hard, but we do them because like, that's how we can get better.
Right.
And they stop being hard, right? And we can do even harder things. And I just really leaned into that reality. I was like, I'm submitting to the process. I'm here, I'm in a container. It's only for a couple months. I'm just gonna lean in and I'm gonna acknowledge that it's hard and I'm gonna just like embrace the suck for a while. And to their credit again, you know, yes, I showed up. Yes, I did the work, which I would do want to highlight that because in hindsight, it's fucking crazy. But I want to give them credit. You know, the city, again, they allowed me to be able to quit T-Mobile, you know, and not go back.
Right.
And again, responsible or not responsible, for how I handled it, ultimately, something the city did do was they gave me an MTA card every month to show up, and they brought lunch every day to the school for us to eat.
Nice.
And that allowed me to not think about, because T-Mobile called me. I don't know if I ever told you that. When I was in the program, they were like, Louis, you're one of our best salespersons. Do you just want to work on weekends?
Right.
You just want to work night shifts?
I think.
Do you want to just work one day a week? Right?
I remember you mentioning something that they were trying to like work a deal out, and then you were kind of thinking about it, but I felt like you were just like, nah. Like at first you were like, yeah, I could do that, but then like I think we're like a couple of days later, you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. You're like, fuck them.
And there's just something that Vic told me. He told me for a separate conversation. There was just something that he told me at one point that made me make that decision of not going back to T-Mobile, which was the right decision. Is he said, you know, if he actually said this when my father was deported and I was struggling. He told me, you know, imagine if you're in Times Square, prime real estate, and there's a shitty building, right? That's like breaking down, the foundation sucks, there's graffiti everywhere, but it's in Times Square. It's in a prime real estate location, but the building is shitty. You know, he says, do you just give up on that land? He said, no, you tear down the building and you build a fucking skyscraper because the land is valuable. And that metaphor, you know, to me was like, basically it represents that like, I myself am that real estate. I am valuable, right? I am incredible. And I am just in a moment where my current worldview isn't serving me and it kind of sucks. But at any time that I want, I can deconstruct it, throw it away, and build something better. So for me in that moment with T-Mobile, I was like, do I want to keep living that life? Do I want to keep being that building? Do I want to keep building, being an identity? Or do I want to tear that shit the fuck down and build a skyscraper? So for me, the decision was easy. It's like, I want to be an engineer. I'm here. This is what I'm doing. Why would I continue to live that previous life? I'm ready to let go of that chapter.
That's exactly not for yourself. Yeah, that's not for yourself at all. Like that's goes everything against what your game plan is. And they were just trying to they weren't trying to throw a fucking wrench, but that's what they're doing. And yeah, you know,
there's a book called The Alchemist that I recommend anyone reads, and like it's a phenomenal book. But
by who?
there's a concept.
Do you know?
in there. The Alchemist. No, I'll.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can link it in the show notes or something like that.
Right.
But you know, there's something that he talks about in that book about, you know, the universe will always conspire for you. The universe will leave omens for you, you know, positive or negative ones. Like it'll test you. Like the universe will kind of like see if you're really about this new life that you're trying to work towards or whatever. And I think to me that was the universe's way of saying, do you really want to be an engineer or not?
Right.
Because if you stay, even if you're just doing T-Mobile one day a week, you're telling yourself that there's a chance being an engineer won't work out and you'll go back to T-Mobile, right? Like that was to me a test from the universe to just ask me that. And listen, I'm not telling people to be irresponsible and just drop everything and chase their dreams, right? Like there was a path here for me. I had a high level of conviction. I had a high level of certainty that I can find a way to better my life through this. Like I felt like it was a responsible decision in the moment.
Yep.
So I don't want to communicate that like, yo, you are a kid from one place, just drop everything and just move to like California. You'll be
fine.
The next The Rock or whatever. Like it was hard. There were difficult moments. It was hard decisions. I had to make sure that I was being responsible. I did take risks. If any of those risks didn't work out, I could have been fucked, right? So, yeah, I don't want to belittle that by just saying that, you know, I made that decision and everything was great. But I did make that decision, and that was the reason I made that decision.
Right.
A side effect of making that decision, and I know this is like something me and you had tension with at the time, which I'm willing to admit that, like, you know, I was young and I was excited and I wasn't as responsible as now, but essentially because I quit T-Mobile and I was doing this boot camp, I couldn't afford to live in Brooklyn anymore. And because this all happened so fast, it wasn't like I could have told you, hey, in 3 months, I'm going to get into Flatiron School and they're going to need me to basically be there 10 hours a day every Monday through Friday. It's like this all just happened. And if I didn't take advantage of it, then I would miss the opportunity. So my now wife at the time, we were still just dating. She was basically like, listen, if you want, we can move in with my dad. He has a spare room. There's not really a bed. There's a mattress that we can use on the floor, but we don't have to pay rent. Right. So again, I have so much respect for him because from his perspective, he's an immigrant that just came to this country, you know, to give a better life for his daughter, for his son. And here comes this like 20-year-old Dominican kid from the Heights that's like, hey, I'm going to quit my job, move into your spare room to go learn about computers. And in his mind, he doesn't even know what a computer is.
Right. Like what the fuck is coding?
What the fuck is a computer?
Yeah,
exactly. I'm trying to explain coding to him. And the thing is, I don't know. And he was like, do you know how to code? I was like, no. Like, oh. It's like,
he's like, okay.
So from his mind, I don't know what compelled him, but he just trusted me. He was like, I'm going to give you a shot. I mean, he's saying this is a couple months.
He probably just saw that you're a good kid. He sensed that you were a good kid at the time because, you know, I knew you were a good homie. You know what I'm saying? You're, you know, not to digress too much, but like you're always you're one of my closest friends, so he probably saw something in you, and you know what? He made the right investment because now you got I'm a husband. Got a house in Texas.
Daughter has a house. We have a beautiful 3-year-old. You know,
he did not.
Everyone's okay.
He did not make a miss. He did not choose a fuckboy, so he made a good bet.
Something. But you know what was crazy was,
shout out to Michelle's pops.
What was crazy was that was West Orange, New Jersey, and the program was on J Street in Brooklyn. That's a 2-hour commute, and we're talking New Jersey Railway, which sometimes just doesn't show up.
It's like, yeah, I'm not working today. It's like, yeah, Joe didn't get up today. He ain't coming.
Yeah. So I had to, and the program started at 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
every day, and it ended at 5. So shout out to my wife as well, because she helped me be accountable. We woke up 5 a.m. every single day for almost 6 months straight. I would walk because we could have Ubered, and when we had a little bit of extra cash, we would Uber. But I didn't really. I like saving the Uber money for her because she didn't sign up for this boot camp. I did. So for me, when it was just me, I would walk. It's like a 20-minute walk, almost a mile walk to the New Jersey train, railway, whatever. So I would walk West Orange to the station. Like that's 20 minutes. Like this is like 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m. Catch that train, or if it was a miss, wait for the next one. Go into Penn Station. Then the city gave me a Metro card, so I used the city's Metro card to take the A train, or I'm pretty sure it was the A train, all the way into Brooklyn. Get out, go to Flatiron School. I was usually there before 8 a.m. Grind mode. Program running at 5, but of course, like stay a little extra. Try to get as much learning in. I was coming home at like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then repeat every single day. And listen, that was fucking hard. That commute was fucking hard. But I would also say it made it easy because it gave me a container. It was like, every day, as long as I do this hard thing of waking up early and doing this commute, I had a distraction-free environment to go to just learn how to code. And that is like an opportunity. Like, shout out to the people that have to work a job, take care of their kids or the family, and learn how to code. And there's definitely ways that you can do that. It's more of a concept of time. Like the reason why that was so intense, all those hours every day, was because in 3-4 months, they wanted to make you employable. Right? If it was a 2-year program, maybe it could have been a lot more chill, right? So it's like there's a lot of variables, but they did give me and acknowledge the opportunity of just like the privilege of like, you can go to a place, sit down every single day and just learn. You don't have to think about anything else, right? As long as I did my part, which was show up every day, submit every day, and push myself every day. And that program was wild. I learned a lot. I took advantage of much of it. It was probably one of the few times that I went out of my own nature of, I'm very social. I like to fuck around. I like to build relationships. When I was in there were moments where it was like, oh, I can build a personal relationship with some of these people, but really I have to learn how to do this code stuff. Right. So it was like I really went in there with clear mind, strong conviction of making the most out of it. And it showed because it was a 6-month program. And in month 4, I was at a meetup and I was just sharing some projects that I had been working on the side. And someone told me, hey, listen, my startup that I work for, their marketing team is looking for an intern for 3 months. Your programs are cool. Do you wanna apply? Right. And I remember I was so caught up in that world of the program. I asked the instructor, hey man, we still got another month or 2 left of the curriculum, but they're offering me a job interview. Should I wait until after the program? And he was just kind of like, Lewis, Lewis, the whole point is to get you a job. If you got a job, get the fucking job.
What are you doing?
Yeah, but like it's because I was so immersed in the world that I stopped turning off that part of the brain so that I could just really maximize.
Especially because you want to get every little bit of information that you can, right? You're in a situation at the time where you're gonna do this hard ass work because you're probably you're gonna do some self-research in the future, but like you want to get over this hump because you don't want to go back and do this ever again, right? So you definitely want to get all the information. Like that's how I felt when I was in Japanese language school, right? Like I didn't want to waste time at all because I don't want to go back. I have to go back because I still need another year. But like once I'm done, that's it. Like I'm not like I'll do like a little studying here and there, but I don't want to do that process ever again. So I want to get it over with. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I would probably been the same way. I would have been like, yeah, no, can I just finish this last month, then like hit them up later? But they probably just were like, no, get the job and
they were right. They were right for that. You know? And one thing that it's small, but I think maybe it speaks to my personality to it a bit, is in that job. So you have all this context from the story, right? Like I was a salesperson I never coded before.
Right.
I got seated a couple things. I like basically try to like force my way into this program. I go through the whole interview. I'm showing up every day. I'm like busting my ass to get a job. My first opportunity gets presented to me, being an intern for a marketing team. And I show up to this interview. And a couple of things that are kind of funny in hindsight. Flatiron taught us Ruby, which is a language.
Right.
And there are a lot of languages. There's a lot of things. We could talk a little bit about that in a bit. But in that interview, they were like, we need CSS and HTML. That's what we need for this internship for marketing. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know HTML, CSS. And they were like, we need someone by Monday next week with HTML, CSS to get started.
Wow.
And I told myself, well, I guess I'm learning HTML and CSS this weekend.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I didn't accept the fact, because I feel like something that frustrates me that I see with people every once in a while is they look for a reason to say no. Right.
Yes.
And that was that opportunity, because we're always trying to fulfill a goal. Like in our life, we're always looking at what goal that we want to fulfill. There's a book called The Courage to Be Disliked. It's one of my favorite books, slightly controversial, but I still think it's a great read. And it talks about the idea, like you're always trying to fulfill a current goal. Some people may say, I want a job, I want this job, but their goal is actually to not get that job. So what they're looking, but they can't really say that because it's not socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because they're afraid of the work. They have anxiety. Like they're always trying to fulfill a current goal. And for a lot of people, being like, I learned Ruby and you're asking me to do HTML, CSS, that would fulfill that goal of
saying no.
To say no.
Yeah.
But I had a very clear goal of I need a fucking job because I'm sleeping on the floor, on this mattress on the floor, and commuting 2 hours for the past 6 months, busting my ass. I need some money. I need to start earning a little bit so I can take care of like this woman who like basically helped me, her father who's giving me a shot. I at that time I didn't handle leaving the apartment in the best way. Like imagine going through that difficult moment between us and then not having anything to like. Now I can say, hey, that helped me launch my career. So sorry that I did that, but like I made the most out of that hard time, So like I really was looking for that yes for that interview. So I just told myself mentally, I'll just learn HTML, CSS. I'll figure it out, right? And again, telling myself weird things to help me like conceptualize what was happening around me. I remember I told myself the story, well, if I don't learn HTML and CSS and they fire me, at least I'll have money for a week before they realize. And then I can, I had 2 months of Flatiron school. I'll just go back there and figure it out. Right. Like I just told myself these like stories to just help me keep moving forward. Even if the stories were silly, it just gave me some strength to like do hard things or make hard decisions.
Because if you don't do that, then you'll just let your mind go into stress mode and panic mode, right? Real quick before you continue, I have exactly the same situation. So I had to extend my visa because my student visa was basically, expiring because I finished like about a month ago in school, right? So, my cousin, she's older than me or whatever. She's like, oh, you got to get it done. You don't want to get into trouble, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, don't worry about it. I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, to me, I'm just like what you're saying. For a normal person to be like, oh shit, I got to do this. What am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. But for me, I was like, if I don't get my visa in time and I get kicked out the country, I'll just go back to Hawaii real quick and just chill out there for like a week and come back. Like, which, I'll spend a little bit more extra money than I needed to. But I'm like, fuck it. It'll be like another week in Hawaii. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have all my friends are there. Who gives a shit? I just told myself that, just kind of like tricking myself. Yeah. And you know what?
And the meta is because it's true. You could do that, but really
I'm releasing myself
in that moment is really exactly giving yourself, because we do know that to an extent this rides on you potentially finding that job or whatever. Yeah. And a stressed you is going to perform worse than a non-stressed.
Exactly.
So all that's doing is, like you said, releasing yourself so that you can put your best foot forward and like make something happen.
And I wish my cousin understood this because she was more stressed out than I was. And I'm like, yo, this has nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, Anyway, but yeah, so you told yourself, I'm gonna just go for it. I'm gonna learn CSS, see what happens, and then what next? What happened?
Yeah, and then again, so I've sort of built up this moment because then they come back.
Yeah.
And they're like, we want to give you the job, right? And this again goes back to like, I'm a weird person. You know what I mean? Like, because I think this is weird. To me, I feel like this is weird, but I do this at every job I've ever had, anything I've ever done.
Okay.
I have a moment where I tell myself, okay, I don't let the past or the future influence my present. I just let it guide me. I let it, like, it's information.
Yeah.
And I use that information to make a decision right there. But I don't get caught up in the, like, I think my favorite thing is Gucci Man gif or video of him being like, you need sauce, but you don't want to get lost in the sauce.
The vice in every.
Yeah, that is like the truest shit ever, because listen, I had sauce. They wanted to give me the job, but I didn't want to get lost in the sauce. I didn't want to like fumble, right? So the recruiter comes back to me and goes like, hey man, we can do $15 an hour, which is more money than I was making at T-Mobile.
Right. With
commission, not as much money, but this was like consistent, and it was an internship or whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I was really looking for, $35 an hour. And he goes like, wait a second. So you've never coded before, never worked somewhere as an engineer. You just finished a boot camp, which what the fuck does that mean? Because no one ever does boot camp, as early boot camps. Like
that doesn't even exist, right?
So you're not as like qualified as somebody with a degree. This is what this motherfucker's telling me. Like,
right.
You're not as qualified as someone with a degree, and you think you want more than what we're offering you right now. I think it was like $35 an hour I asked for, and 35, and I told him this. I knew this was gonna happen. I knew you were gonna give me a number, and I knew that I was gonna want to just see if I can poke the devil a little bit. And my family calls me an habitual line stepper, right? There's like easy, yes, I can just take the money, get in. Yeah, I can be like, oh, it's just starting off. I can make more money later. I could have told myself any story. But I do know that negotiation is important. I do know that there's always room to negotiate. And I do know that like the reason people don't negotiate is not because they can't make more money, it's because they themselves feel uncomfortable. Yeah. So it's a personal battle. So in that moment, I was like, he told me this, right? He's like, you're not qualified, blah, blah, blah. It's your first job. And I was like, listen, you're absolute. I hear you. I know from my peers that went through the same program that I'm going through, and from my peers that are engineers in the industry, that the starting rate is 30 to 35. And I just want to be where the starting rate is for the market, right? And he goes like, okay, hold on. He comes back and goes like, the best we can do is like $28 an hour. I was like, let's do it, right? So like, even in this, I spent like months, like I left my apartment, I'm on the floor, I'm like figuring all this shit out. And even then, I was like, to an extent, I know my worth. I know negotiation is important. I'm not just going to say yes to some bullshit. Because don't get me wrong, it was more money than I was making. But for an intern, $50 an hour
that's bullcrap.
Bullshit for a coder.
And they know that.
Maybe even, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And maybe 28, 30 was also low. I don't know. But for me, that was a number that I could feel proud about and show up as my best self. Right?
So really important. You always got to put that extreme anchor. Always. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You just got to test the waters anyway, regardless. Because the worst come to worst, they're going to just say no, and then you just give in. That's it. I mean, what are they going to say? Oh, we're not going to give it to you anymore now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's highly unlikely. It could happen. It could go that way. But you have to, like, really piss them off to, like, do something like that. But you should always try to test that. And I'm sure you looking back at that, you probably could have asked for 25 and still got away with that. But, you were definitely in the situation that you were in at the time. Yeah, maybe we should have pushed it too much, but but yeah, no.
I always, you know what's even crazy?
Yep.
Again, going into my own psychology, and maybe this is not like fair. I don't fucking know. I think all is fair in negotiation to an extent. I had no idea I didn't know anyone. There was no one in my community that ever did this. I had no idea what numbers were, and I couldn't like leave and negotiate with someone. So what I told myself was this: they're gonna give me a number. I'm gonna add $20 to it. I'm gonna then tell them that based on what my peers are telling me, this is the market rate, and then they'll meet me somewhere higher than their offer but lower than mine, because he needs to feel good too. He can't be like, I just gave it to him. He needs to feel like he beat me up a little bit, right? His own ego. So like, I didn't even have these numbers. I was just like, whatever the number is, I'm gonna tax it, and then we'll negotiate.
But you know what's funny? I'm thinking about
That's
this.
Like New York shit too. That's like our culture.
But it's funny because I'm thinking in my head, that recruiter was so used to just saying a number and people taking it. So when you said that that was probably the first time he heard that, and just like he went back like, yo, what are we supposed to do? Like, he actually knows what's going on. Like, and you probably, like you said, you didn't know what the fuck was going on, but they were just like, oh shit, like he knows that we're lowballing him right now. What should we do? He's like, just give him another $5 on top of it, you know? So
well, if you know, knowing tech now and knowing a little bit more about budgets and salary now, those numbers, like, no one was losing sleep over giving me an extra $10-$20 an hour.
Right.
That was a fart.
Yeah, that was just like an edge.
Gender cut.
Yeah.
Didn't matter, right? That was 100% a battle between maybe that recruiter's ego and what I was like.
Right.
That was not a money. That moment. Sometimes it is about money, but that moment was not about the actual money.
Yeah.
It was one, proving to myself that I can still negotiate for my worth, even when I think a lot of people could be justified in saying, I really just need my breakthrough. I've invested so much time. So like, no one would blame someone who just takes that offer. I understand. But I needed to prove myself to an extent that, like, even when the chips may appear down or stressful or there's urgency, I'm still able to keep my head cool and still negotiate from like a place of strength and not a place of weakness. Again, I don't really know. I wasn't thinking that at that age, at that time, but that is like the behaviors that I was demonstrating, and that I kept strengthening throughout my career, and I've gotten better and better at, and things that I do to try to educate new engineers or new people in their career about like maintaining that position of strength, and like, hey, I understand and I know that it's hard to push back when you really need a job or whatever, you know. So, you know, I get in, and again, I do the same shit that I did in negotiation. In like my first week, I met the team. One potential controversial thing that I did, I don't think is controversial because I think it's just a mindset thing. And then one thing that I think is kind of funny because it's just how like my quirks. You know, first week on the job, I get set up, I meet the team, everything's going smoothly. They're like, because we're paying you more money, we cannot go over this many hours, right? Because it was like an internship, right? And they were like, it's a 3-month internship, you cannot go over this many hours, but we need you to do this work. And I was like, yeah, no problem, I'll make sure it happens. This is how I interpreted that. This is the controversial bit. This is my interpretation. I am going to deliver the work that you want always, regardless of how many hours it takes me. I understand that I can only charge you for 40 hours. Yeah. But if it takes me 60 hours, it takes me 60 hours. But I also view that as like a double-edged sword. I will work 80 hours for you and only charge you for 40. But if I can do it in 20 hours, I'm going to still
catch you for 40. Right.
Like, I'm just like, that was like maybe controversial, but
I think that's fair.
And I almost never, actually almost always went over, not under, because I was starting my career. It just took me longer to do stuff. But really the thinking was this is the mindset that I had. If I was playing a game of dollars in that moment, which I don't know how, it's weird because I feel like this might contradict the salary negotiation. I never like really thought about it. I don't think it does though. But you know, if I was playing a game of dollars with that billable hours, and it was in a vacuum with nothing else, then I would understand being like, why would you work extra hours for money that you're not going to get paid for? Right. And like, that's fair. You should like be compensated for all the work that you do. I did agree up front to not do overwork. They were okay if something took longer because of that. But I took it upon myself to still work extra. That was my decision because I was playing a different game. And that different game that I was playing was, which I told them was, this is a 3-month internship. My goal for these 3 months is to give you so much value that you hire me full time.
Okay.
That was the game that I was playing. So I made that clear to them. I was like, I'm going to show up, do my best possible work, and at the end, just give me a shot at a full-time job. And they were like, hey, if you come in and crush it, we will do everything we can to make sure you get a full-time job. We can't guarantee it, but consider this like a long-form interview then, right? Show up, do work. So that's why for me, that trade-off of like, I'll work a couple extra hours that I can't bill them for because they've made that clear. But if it helps demonstrate the worth that I can bring over time, because I knew I'll get better. I knew I'll learn, because half of that time was just me learning HTML and CSS. I didn't know this, right? So I was paying like a knowledge tax on top of the work. So for me, I was like, yeah, this is fine. Like, I don't mind putting in a little extra work. It's also fun. I'm living in alignment. I'm doing what I enjoy. I'm solving problems. I'm building stuff. I'm creating value. I wanted to code more because I was loving what I was doing. And again, I'm not saying everyone should do that or have that viewpoint, but for me, in my situation, it helped me play the long game. And like, naturally, it's what I wanted to do. I just got a job in a career that I've been working towards. I was excited, I was hungry. And that turned into building great relationships. That got me a full-time offer. And then from there, my career just being a little rocket ship. I used those early lessons every step of the way. I turned that internship to a full-time offer. That turned into a promotion within like a couple months after that. It turned into a few more promotions. We were acquired. We went through an acquisition. I took on like a senior role for like a design system. That went well. Then I went to American Express, crushed it over there, worked on a couple big teams, a couple international projects, went to like the startup space.
Pretty much rest is history.
And just like kept building towards and something that I wanted to, a little plug for myself, I always knew, and I would have done this sooner, but I got advice from a mentor in that first job, the head of marketing. He pulled me aside and said, Louis, you have the right perspective to be an entrepreneur. Because I told him I wanted to be an entrepreneur. You have the right perspective to be an entrepreneur. Pay your tech tax. Just keep your head down and build shit for like 5 or 6 years. Get really good at building stuff, and you will be able to figure out the rest. And I really took that to heart. So all that experience was me jumping into different teams, jumping into different. I worked for marketing. I worked for product. I worked with legacy systems. I worked for
just getting your feet wet.
I worked for just everywhere, just adding value wherever I can, and always challenging myself. And this year, after a decade in tech, I'm a founder for a small tech company called Major. Me and my co-founder, we've soft launched already.
Nice.
We have a couple coaches in our pipeline, and we're going to do a more official launch in the upcoming weeks. So I'm proud to say, wow, I have a long career as an engineer. I'm currently a founder building something that I think is going to help a lot of people out in the world. And we can always talk more about that. We don't have to necessarily talk too much about it. But if you are a coach, if you know any coaches, definitely go to major.coach, sign up to our wait list, and we'll definitely talk more. And my engineering background is what's allowing me to build that out.
Well, it's a great chance for people to check out your stuff after, getting to know you on the podcast. We'll definitely get into that a little bit more. I will link all the information in the descriptions when we do post this episode. Actually, on that note, talking about just getting into this whole space, let's get into the advice giving. Now you got a decade of software engineering under your belt. Actually, real quickly, how long have you been doing this? What are your expertise? Like, what languages that you mostly do? And just mention whatever companies that you've been working with real quick before we get into this.
So
how long has it been?
Question in different. So it's
career-wise. Let's just say career-wise.
I'd say about 10 years since I started writing code. So just about, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but say about a decade of making money, right? Making money professionally. So that's really cool. And in terms of what languages I use, I'll change that a little bit. And I think if you're someone looking to get into tech, adopt a similar mindset. I have the mindset of there's a problem, we solve it.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's really my mindset. So the reason why I say that is I consider myself very T-shaped. So if you think like the letter T, I go very wide in tech, meaning like I'm comfortable jumping into
Different.
almost any area, any part of the infrastructure, any part of the stack. Because if there's a problem, to me, it's not acceptable to say, oh, I don't work on the back end system, so I'm not gonna if there's no one else that's more equipped to handle it, and you're that line of defense. So as an engineer, really in anywhere, if there's a problem, just try to be creative and find a way of solving it. Best practices are best practices. How we build something in one language may look different in another language, but a lot of the core principles are somewhat transferable, right?
Okay.
At least when it comes to building things responsibly. So first, I adopt that mindset. So very T, that's wide. But my specialty is building client interfaces. So what that means for the web is it's JavaScript and the entire JavaScript ecosystem.
Okay.
So that's that's Node for backend JavaScript. On the client, that could be a JavaScript framework like Vue, React, just vanilla plain JS if it calls for it,
okay.
HTML, CSS. And the reason why I specialize, or I like to call out, it's not just a language, it's anything with client interfaces, because there's a lot of knowledge that's not just coding that's important. One is accessibility.
Okay.
I care a lot about accessibility. I care a lot about performance. I care a lot about these adjacent things, UI, UX, how they connect, and how the experience is for the user. You can code and not think about any of this stuff, and the quality of your product will suffer, right? And you can not be a great coder, but be very knowledgeable on these areas, and you can still bring a lot of value to a company, right?
Okay.
So accessibility, performance, all these things are important. So because tech to me is very fuzzy, it's not I do this one thing and I'm always doing this one thing. It's more we have a problem that we're solving. Let's say the problem is users have to sign up for our platform or subscribe to our podcast. If that's the problem you're solving, it's not good enough to be oh, I can code it. You have to think about, is this button placed in the right area? Is it visible enough? When I click the button, are all the things happening that are supposed to happen? How do I know that this button's being clicked? Can I track that event somewhere? Right?
Where are people dropping off at?
Right. So it's not just as an engineer, because we're so close to the code, we're so close to the problem, that means we're also close to the solutions. To me, it's you have to view it holistically and be willing to learn quickly. And I would say that's my second piece of advice. The first being view yourself as a problem solver and don't limit yourself to just current language that they If you solve problems, you'll learn the coding, because that's just, you have to code to solve the problem. If you start from a problem solution mindset, the pieces become clear. My second piece of advice is if you had to learn one skill set in general, not just coding, but definitely helps for coding, be really comfortable with learning and constantly being willing to grow. There's something in, this is kind of nerdy, techie, but there's something called the JIT engine, so JIT engine, which is always funny to me because a JIT in Florida is a soft boy.
Okay.
Yeah. So that word is always funny to me, like JIT, but JIT, and it's something I think it's something Google made. It's the just-in-time engine. So it's a way of basically I'm gonna run this code the moment when it needs to run, and not earlier, as a performance enhancement. Someone explained that to me once. It was a mentor of mine, and then I just changed it to myself to be oh, as an engineer, I do that for learning, just in time learning. So that means instead of trying to learn everything in the world in coding, because then I'll feel I can solve anything. Instead, I've embraced, I don't know a lot of things, but when the problem requires me to learn the solution for that problem, I'm really good at learning that just in time. I don't that's the scribe scenario, the subscribe button. When I click it, I need it to send some analytics so I know someone clicked it. Maybe I don't know how to actually submit an event for analytics. Let's just say I don't know how to do that. to me, that's okay because I don't have that problem currently. So it doesn't matter that I don't know it. The moment I'm talking to a stakeholder and they're like, hey, our users want to know how many people click this, we have to like track that click event. I'm like, okay, now I need to be very good at learning everything about analytics, clicking and tracking in time to solve this problem. So I'm really good at not knowing something and compressing the time it takes to learn that thing responsibly, right? Some people be like, I need months to learn how to do this. I can probably do it in like a couple of days. And as I got better as an engineer, it took me a week to learn this. Now it takes me 3 days. Now I can just read docs for 30 minutes and make some pretty good progress.
So through that experience, you're creating not getting good at coding, but creating strategies and methods for your own self, how to learn these things a faster way. I'm sure there's something that's
faster, how to be competitive.
I'm sure there's like parallels to all these things because they're, it's all technology at some point. So at some level, there's some kind of connection to it. But basically what you're saying is, you don't need to learn or know everything, but when the time comes to need to know something to get something done, because you're a problem solver, you need to be able to get to that method of solving quick as possible so you could please whatever stakeholder.
Right. And you have to take into account, just very quickly, I want to mention that like tech is vast and there's different problems in different areas. And I'm speaking from the experience that I've had in terms of building products for consumers. Because I'll give you a contrast. If you're doing self-driving, like AI models, for cars, there is no like just-in-time learning. That literally does not exist, and people are out there trying to make that exist, right? So that's a space where like actually you probably do benefit from like being an academic, being like a mathematician or being a statistician. Like you probably benefit from being in that area because that's just the problem they're solving requires that kind of background or strategy. So, but tech is wide, right? So like find the pocket that aligns with your interest or like how you like to operate. Most things consumers want to do exists in another form. So it's just about finding and aggregating this information, making it come together in a new creative way, and then presenting that, right? But like, for example, we're streaming right now. If I want to build a streaming platform, I can pull from Twitch, YouTube, like there's these things exist in different forms, right? It's just how do we make it in a way that speaks to an audience or for a product? So this strategy, I think, works very well for the kind of work that I do in tech. There are other types of tech work where you may do elements of this, but you also may need other strategies that work for that.
Interesting. That's pretty intense, because from an outside perspective, you always think like coding is just, you just learn one language and, you're just typing up a lot of code, blah, 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 that's all about it. But at the core of things, you guys are just problem solvers and that's pretty intense. But, I'm sure like, over time you build your methods to get to the goal a lot faster than usual. Real quick, I kind of want to see, like, go back a little bit, take a step back and talk about speak to me like as if I'm getting into coding and, talk about what I should be doing first and things to look out for when I embark in this new journey of like learning to code. Because I have actually a younger friend who's actually getting into it, who just so happens to be from Florida. He's just trying to switch his career to that. So I'm asking this for him essentially. So if you want to take that part.
Yeah, and always feel free to make any introduction with anyone trying to break through. And I'm always willing to give like direct.
Nah, fuck that kid. He'll figure it out for himself. And I'll let him know that I said this.
Yeah.
This is the most I'm gonna do for him.
And I'll definitely say that like my first thought is that there are a lot of people. Some of them are good people that want to help, and some of them just have fucking egos, right? Like you can learn, you can learn something from everyone, no matter what their incentives are behind them. But I would say like one of the steps is just like, we live in the internet, we're hyper connected, leverage that as much as possible. If someone DMs me on LinkedIn or whatever, or in IG or whatever, like, hey, I want to get into tech, I have some questions, I've never not. I'm not famous, right?
Yeah.
So like I read my DMs. So like I never don't respond and at least give them a coffee chat or a Zoom or whatever. If you're not doing that and you're trying to break into the industry, just do that. Like people like hearing themselves talk, so let them talk.
Yeah.
But like in a way that you can benefit from. So that's definitely advice I'd give anyone who's starting off. But now, specific about getting into this as a career, I think first I would need you to take a step back and answer some like very basic questions because it absolutely changes everything to me.
Okay.
The first one is like, what's your time horizon, right? Because I didn't have a kid.
Right.
I had a girlfriend who was supportive. I had her father who gave me a place to stay. Excuse me. I had a time horizon. All those things meant that my time horizon grew, meaning like I had more time to develop a skill set before I absolutely had to stop learning and start earning.
Right.
Right. And everyone has a different time horizon. Some people have 4 years of college.
Right.
Some people have 8 years. Some people, they're like, I need money
Now.
next month.
Right.
Right. Some people are like, I have a family, so I can never not be making money.
Right.
Some people are like, I can eat ramen for a very, very long time and survive off pennies, right? So I think the first thing you have to get real about is what's your time horizon? Like, how long could you go? And not just how long could you go, but how deep could you go every day?
Right.
Could you do 8 hours every day or could you only do weekends? Because I think the saying is like there's 10,000, everyone has to put in like 10,000
hours, yeah, to be a master.
Right. And like, we're not even talking, here's the thing people don't realize. You'll get hired for a job before you become a master.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you don't have to like become a great engineer to start earning some money.
Right.
You can make money way before you become a great engineer. Actually, like Flatiron School told me that they were like, when you leave here, you'll still suck.
Yeah.
But you'll be good enough to make some money.
Right.
And it's up to you to keep learning and growing. So
and be considered to be accepted to working for a company or intern at the very least.
Right. So, you know, I don't necessarily think you have to become a master. So it's not 10,000 hours, but you have to know how much hours you can dedicate against how much time are you willing to spend learning. And that'll help tell you a milestone as to when you should be ready, to get a job. And I start there because that changes the equation of what you should learn or realistically could learn and how you should go about learning it, right? Because, you know, just to draw a contrast, if you only have 3 months to get a job, but you can dedicate every single day for 3 months. Right. You have 3 months of unlimited hours before you have to start applying. If you wanted to get into advanced machine learning and get into like some of this cutting edge stuff and like be part of a core part of that industry, I don't know if that's enough time. It might be, depending on the person, depending on their background, but I just don't know if there's enough time for that person to like upskill. It's not that they shouldn't start learning this, but if the goal is to get a job, like we're adding an objective metric now. We're saying like there is a clear goal. So that means there is now a concept of efficiency. Right. If you're just out here fucking around, efficiency doesn't matter. You can learn whatever you want. But if we're talking about efficiency, we have to deconstruct and add some boundaries, right? And I would say going into AI in 3 months may be harder to accomplish than, let's say, building emails for a marketing team. Right. You're still coding emails, and yeah, there's a pay discrepancy between an AI person and an email person. There's a gap there in pay, but they're both in tech. They're both coding to an extent, right? But I definitely believe someone within 3 months can learn a shit ton about emails, become a great email person, even learn about the email marketing side of things, not just building it, and go out there and get a job solving that problem, right? So I start with there, like, hey, first, what's your time horizon? Right. And what's your commitment? Because then we can formulate a mental model to get you to success.
So basically, what you're saying is it's better to think about, or at least explore what kind of problem solving situations that you want to get into. And then from there, whatever one that you feel like resonates, and I'm sure you could mention some, like whether it's email marketing or, you know, kind of more like surface level, easier things to do. But like once you figure out, all right, this is the spectrum that I kind of want to deal with, then you kind of like, then you start learning what around that, what languages you need to learn for that.
Because the criteria that you gave me with your friend was like, you didn't say it explicitly, but like I caught on to it, which is like, he's working and he's doing like a career shift.
Yep.
That means to some extent he has lifestyle.
Yep.
That means to some extent he needs a source of income, which means that like we need to like not be naive and be like, the best thing you can do to make the most money is to learn about
this language or this, right.
But if it takes 2 years of 40 hours a week for 2 years to get there, that's not realistic for your friend, right? Like he can long term, he can work towards that, but he need to short term learn some other things that can make him
right
money,
because
put him on that path.
Right, because basically what if your time horizon's wide, go for the bigger stuff, right? Like if you have time to put in 8 hours a day, which in our adult lives it's not really likely, but if you do, go for the big dog stuff. But if you don't have that big time horizon, just go for something smaller, because at least if you go for something smaller and get the foot in the door, then you can start going for the big dog stuff because you're already in that space, right? Now you could
it's strategy,
right?
Exactly.
That makes sense. I understand.
That's usually like the first step that I do, because you know I've worked with I had a junior engineer that I mentored who was pregnant when she started,
right?
You know, and that
obviously takes
her advice. My advice to her was different than my advice would be like, I'm 18, finishing high school. My parents will take care of me for the next like 10 years. You know, I don't have to worry about healthcare. I don't have to worry about retirement, right? It's a different person, different roadmap. So I usually start there, like really get clear about like how that journey looks for you. Now, what that's going to do is eliminate options for the short term to get to that goal of like your first role. And that's actually a good thing, because something I see a lot of people struggle with is like, what should I learn? What should I do? And tech is vast. It is so fucking big. Even pockets have entire fucking billion-dollar industries.
Right.
It's massive. So it's actually a good thing. Like the constraint actually makes you more free, because it makes it easier to say no to things, right? And that's actually like the real trick. Like people think, oh, I have to say yes to everything. Real level of discipline comes from being able to know when you should say no, right? Because then it's usually not the things that we say no to that makes us unsuccessful. It's all the things that we say yes to that makes us unsuccessful. Right. We end up overloading ourselves, overstimulating. And that means that like we're not able to focus on what actually matters. So the fact that like that time horizon conversation says, okay, we need to limit the scope to just these areas or these pockets. My next step of advice is like, well, let's like think about what tech means to you and understand what kind of problems you're interested in solving. This can change throughout your career, but that's actually like very, very insightful, worth doing, because for me, tech is like products for consumers, and that usually falls under mobile or websites, right? But I know people that like tech for them has always had a strong relationship to streaming in video or audio. I know people that like tech to them has a strong relationship to gaming and like graphical experiences. There's some people that tech means to them is like doing the lighting at like festivals and shit like that, programming, different stuff like that.
Using
like,
DAWs and MIDIs and stuff.
So tech means something to different people based on their background. So it's good to understand what that is, because that'll further scope what technologies you should learn. Because if you're like, yo, tech for me is like, I love iPhone apps. That shit is so cool. You can just download an app and build it. Well, we know iPhone apps are built using specific languages and tools. Let's learn that. Why learn the web tools if you're already very clear or have high conviction on mobile, right? Because and they're in more subtle ways too. It's like, how do you even learn? I'm a visual learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a visual learner that appreciates a fast feedback loop.
Right.
So building web and mobile applications is great for me because I code something and I see the website update. I code some more, I see it update. It's creating a feedback loop that makes me feel like excited and
Right.
interested and engaged. There are some people that like are not UI learners, are not interested in UI, and they just enjoy data and a lot of information. And like maybe those people make more sense as like data scientists. Like they like graphs, they like charting. Maybe they're getting into like Python or R or something like that, and they're getting into data science. So just like also it's like how do you enjoy working? How do you enjoy learning? Because different languages are used for different purposes. And those purposes.
So in other words, your advice to somebody who's young or somebody starting this journey, they need to really just explore or ask themselves what they like, and also explore a lot of different languages and different methods of doing stuff to see what like really hits. Obviously, you're not going to do everything.
How they learn, yeah.
Right.
Because the goal is, so why am I saying all of this?
Right.
Learning how to code, fundamental principles are going to be very similar across different languages. But the hard part is showing up every day and doing the work. That's the hardest part. So basically, I ask these questions because I'm trying to create it's called the pit of success, where it's like by you doing nothing, you just end up falling into being successful.
Right.
So it's like pit of success. I just by showing, like the boxing gym with you in boxing. If you just show up to the boxing gym just by being there, you're going to be successful because you're going to talk about boxing. You're going to want to spar. Like the environment forces you to participate in the culture.
You're looking at it every day. Right.
Yeah. So the reason why I ask these questions is because I know the hard part is going to be learning how to code and like showing up every day.
Yeah.
It is even harder, not by a little bit, but by a lot, if while you're showing up, you have to worry about money or like everyday life.
Yeah.
So that's why I ask about the time horizon. If you're a visual learner and you're doing something that's not visual, like that's gonna be hard for you to learn and show up because you're like, I feel my brain turns off, this hurts, like I don't understand what's going on, right? So like what I'm trying to do is create questions that create a model or a space where when you show up, the only friction is you doing the learning of coding and you don't have all this other friction.
Right.
Like the thing you're coding stimulates how you learn. The time horizon complements your ability
how much to learn this, right?
Consistently. Right. Because if you figure out that, it's just showing up in coding. You're not worrying about all the other external factors, right? I learned that from Flatiron School. So at that point, you're like, okay, based on when I want to make money and based on how I want to work and the things that I'm interested in building, there's now, let's say 10. Like there's 10 ways of doing that, right? Like, and you can use Google, right? Or you can even use ChatGPT. You could be like, hey, I'm a visual learner. I'm interested in building mobile applications. I have 12 months. Like, how could I build a curriculum for myself, right? Like you can ask that question, but you see how like that's so much easier to answer than like how do I get into tech?
Yeah.
Right? Like you've built like an actual clear communicated intention, and like that is powerful because that's how you actually deliver results for yourself. So now you have this and you're like, okay, there are maybe 5 paths for me, right? Objective-C, Swift. For the back end, maybe I want to learn Firebase or whatever, like, you know, so like you create this path. My next recommendation to people is community and action. Like that's you're gonna be successful. So action is going back to what I quoted earlier, you know, the obstacle is the way, the impediment to action, advances action.
Right.
It's really is. It's essentially saying like, okay, we got to a place finally where you can code.
Okay.
Lean into coding. Just like go try. And the best way to lean into coding, in my opinion, is solve a problem. Have a problem and try to get to a solution. Now, let's say the problem is I want to build my first blog, right? Something simple.
Yeah.
That could be I'm going to buy myself try to code a blog. It could also just be like, I'm going to follow a tutorial for building a blog. But like, because you're just starting off, I think it's fine to do learning resources, tutorial and stuff.
Yeah.
But like the intention is, the problem is you don't have a blog right now and you're just trying to solve it. Solve it however you can. Over time, you can increase the difficulty. First, I'm going to build it following this YouTube tutorial. Next, I'll build it following a blog post. Last, I'll build it with nothing, right? And then maybe after that, I'll be like, hey, Mike, I want to build a blog for you. Can you give me some expectations? I'm going to try to build it. You can increase the difficulty, but always view it from like, what problem do I want to solve right now? Because humans are really good at solving problems.
Yeah.
So we could actually use that as a mental hack to just say, how am I going to build a blog? Just by asking that question, your brain will be like, okay, I got to Google, I got to check a YouTube video, I got to blah, blah, blah. And then within building it, you'll find other problems. Yo, this tutorial has this button brown, but I kind of want to see if I can make it red, right? And you just keep leaning in. But building something and building towards something, I think it's key. Without that, you're just not going to get there, right? Like ultimately, you're being hired to solve problems, and you're solving them by building solutions. So if you view your learning as, what's a problem that I want to solve, and I'm going to go build the solution to that problem, you get into that habit, you're already going to face a lot of the everyday challenges that you will on the job. Not all of them, but enough of them that you can become employable. Right. And that's key. The second piece that's important is immerse yourself in community. Do not, we grew up in an environment, at least for me, where like New York City in like the mid 90s, early 2000s, like that era where I was like a young guy, where I didn't want to talk to people. I want to just get from point A to point B. If you're talking to me, it's because I think there's something sus happening. Right. But this goes back to limiting beliefs. That was a limiting belief that served me on the block. That is not going to serve me if I'm trying to break into a brand new industry. Find community. There's community everywhere. There's community in person. There's community in Discord servers. There's communities on IG from educational people in the comments or whatever. And like, there's community in like circle communities. There's communities on Reddit. Find a community that is in a similar context, or at least a level or two ahead of you, that you can just through osmosis participate in. Right. And that's going to help you significantly, right? Because if you do these things in a silo, first, if you're doing something wrong, there's no feedback loop for improvement. That's not great. Two, we know that we're tribal, and we know that we're collaborative. And if we don't lean into that part of our human nature, we're just gonna take longer to get something done. Me and you can build a bed frame faster than I can alone, right? It's just like, that's just the reality. And community will help. Not guaranteed, but community can help you with opportunity, can help you with like giving you further information, can help you participate in like other areas of improvement. Like you get so much from immersing yourself in community, and that's something I've struggled with for a long time. But it is worth saying that like, go out there and solve problems, and like have a community to share that with.
No, what you illustrated is exactly how I got into boxing anyway. Shout out to Argenis. He built, when he created Sweatbox Brooklyn, he also created a community. And through that experience of being there, not only working there, but being there, I now can teach people. Because that was not my intention to teach people. But I've been there for so long that within you could give me 3 seconds. I just need 3 seconds. You touch the bag. As soon as you touch the bag, I know exactly what you're doing wrong, right? But I got people I see online, because everybody's a boxing expert on social media, right? I see people always asking questions or saying things. I'm like, you're not gonna know anything till you have an actual coach giving you feedback. You know what I'm saying? So going back to what you're saying, I think I totally agree. I think community is super important, because you could sit there, watch YouTube videos, you could do all these things that find information on the internet, but if you don't have somebody correcting, it's like, let's say for example, you want somebody to build a button on the website, right? Like, sure, you probably know how to build a button, but is it the right way you're doing? Is this the best way for it? And is this the best way for your goal of what you're trying to achieve? Just like me trying to teach somebody to jab. yeah, sure, you probably learned it from some, you know, two-time world champion on YouTube, but because the way you interpret certain things, you're not doing it exactly how he's teaching you. And I'm here to fix that for you. Without that,
Yeah,
without that feedback, you won't never know that.
no, right. And the truth of the matter is, like, community gives you exactly that. I'm going to go back to something we talked about earlier about
Yep.
building that subscribe button. I think if I were to tell you build me a subscribe button and you're a first time engineer, you may figure out eventually how to make a button. And when you click it, it saves that user to a database. But guess what? In the real world, in a real scenario, and like we mentioned earlier, analytics are a thing. So how do you build that button to also like capture that event that occurred and store it? And if you've never worked at a company, you've probably never really even heard of a concept of analytics and tracking. So you're learning how to build a button that does it solves the immediate problem of being
Which
a button
capturing that person's information, right. But you're not capturing the other stuff.
Thinking about the real stuff that happens at these companies.
Yep.
And a community will be like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if like you are also tracking this event and then showing it to me in a graph so I know how many people did or did not? Like you get in there, we'd be like, why would I do that? Well, analytics is how subscribers grow their channels. Yep. And you're like, oh shit, how do I build a button that does that also, right? So community just challenges you, gives you opportunity to grow. And one last thought that really resonates with me is the reason, again, going back to like always be building, right? Always be problem solving. You can go through a boot camp and learn how to, you can still do all the tutorials, all the YouTube videos, but just put it inside the umbrella of my goal after this is to have built something that I can show people and like share with my community. And the reason why you want to do that, for all the benefits we said, but as like a closing thought on it, is Alex Hormozy says something that I really resonate with, is that like confidence is building a stack of undeniable proof, right?
Okay.
So like if you feel uncertain in becoming an engineer in your journey, that's totally normal. We all have moments of what I call FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. How you overcome that is by building proof. So if you've never built a blog before, you're gonna have a little bit of uncertainty there. But if you build the blog and then you go to a job interview and they tell you, can you build a blog? You're gonna have confidence because you have undeniable proof, right? So you could learn how to code academically or just by reading docs and playing around. But if you're gonna go out there to get a job to build something, having built things on your own will give you undeniable proof to yourself that you can build things. Right. And that is very important when you're in that negotiation room and you're smiling and you're telling them, hey, my worth is more, right?
Yeah.
It's worth more because you have undeniable fucking proof.
And the worst thing you could say is, oh, no, but I only learned this language, so I'm only capable of doing that.
Don't
you know?
Do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just thinking from a very naive, like, because there are people out there, especially younger crowds. They just it goes back to the thing
know what you don't know.
Yeah, and then we were talking about the thing that we were talking about earlier. Like we're so quick to give up and just be like, no, we can't do that. It's like, no, you just gotta kind of like navigate your way through it and just believe that you can do it. Because I mean, you got that far, why can't you do the next thing? You know what I'm saying? So, but we're actually hitting up at the 2-hour mark. This is actually going to be the time for our episode for today. But there was actually so much more that I want to go over, but a lot of great stuff that we went over today. I can't wait to show it to my friend because he's getting into the space, and I think he could there's a lot of key takeaways that you had mentioned for this. I would love to do another episode. There's a lot of things about now that I want to talk about, but because of the time constraint that we're at, we might have to save it for another episode. But yeah, man, thank you for coming through. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that we finally get to talk about this because I always wanted to really just get into like the nitty gritty of like your journey. And I always wanted to, I know that you know this, but I always tell people how proud I am of you. I always think of you as an inspiration. I think what you do and how you navigate life was always inspiring to me, and it's always motivation. I'm so honored to have you as a friend. But yeah, man, let's do more episodes. If you got the time for it, Also, tell Michelle thank you for holding the kid down while we do
Yeah,
this,
holding down the kid now. For
because
sure.
that's really
Yeah,
appreciative.
and listen, I'll come back anytime you want. To me, you are family, so I love chopping it up with you anytime we
Yep.
get. We used to chop it up basically every day, but
Yep.
now we're both big boys. We
Yeah.
got families, we got countries between us. So
Yep.
any chance we get to chop it up, I'm always grateful. I as we went through a lot.
Yep.
In my 20s, your late 20s or whatever. So you're family to me too. So I want to be part of your success any way possible.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Likewise, it's always a mutual thing. But yeah, let's wrap it up here. I'm gonna go ahead and break down this episode, and we'll get it to bite size. We'll promote it. Later on, just send me the information for your product, and also if you could send some resources for people that will watch this, we'll see the highlights, the books and the any resources that they could use. All right.
For sure,
All right.
definitely.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. We'll talk very soon, brother. We'll
All right,
do another time.